Careful.
Thank you so much for coming today. I'm Anne LeBrack, the Outreach Librarian at the Lansing Library and Learning Commons, and I would like to welcome Dr. Peng Kwong Chong, who will introduce our speaker today.
Where do we turn this off? Thank you. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Okay, that's good. Thank you, Anne. It is truly a great pleasure for me to be here. And more importantly, it is truly very sentimental for me to be here to introduce a colleague like Manuel. We came here in 1966, but supposedly he's smart enough to retire in 96. And I'm still around. And I threaten everybody that I'm going to work until the year 2020. But anyway, the great pleasure is to know Manuel and to also to have read his book and then to give a little remark about him and what he has done in writing his book. First of all, if I were just to read all his accomplishments and all his scholarly work and his dynamic past, it would take the whole hour. So I promise him, and I think he's happy that I'm not going to brag about him, that he is good enough. He doesn't need any of the bragging. But I think it is important to emphasize the author's link with the past, because I truly believe that you can, in many ways, look at the past and rejuvenate it and use it to point to the future. And I think this book, in many ways, does that. And Manuel does it in such a way that in Japanese, we would say it is like shibumi, you know, effortless perfection. And truly, he's a man. When he lectures, I can see all his old students here. And old in the sense of, you know, those who have recently graduated. You should not be afraid of the word old. All of us who are over there. Old, we can be old in years, but as long as we are young in our adaptability to changing times, that is the great thing. And I think Manuel has that. You look at him, he has retired, you know, but he's producing things. He's even teaching a course of all things, you know. He teaches opera, he teaches, history. And I was fortunate enough, when I was very new here, both of us, 1966, to teach, of all things, world history. Now, look at it, world history. I came originally from Malaysia, and he is from Cuba, and both of us teaching world history, you know. Me armed with all my latest pictures from Europe, and he, I think, just having a good time in Gloria, having a honeymoon in Europe. That's a different story. But what is important here is also lineage. You can write a book, you can be passionate about it, but I think what Manuel has is also a long line of genes, of writers, of scholars, of diplomats, of people who have heart. And I think that too is the painful part of his book about his father and how with his father's vision, helping to write the Constitution, representing his country in many places, using his brilliant mind to enrapture Cubans and perhaps even the United States to look at Cuba in a different way, with concept of freedom and liberty and so forth. And yet he lost. And of all things, today, November 3, 1958 was the Cuban election that he lost. And then within a year, after some house arrest from Fidel, he had to flee his country and come to the US. And then later on, Manuel and Gloria had to follow. I looked at this period and I said, you know, it's so interesting. His father was under house arrest, and I was sitting in a British jail in 1958. for 3 days, only 3 days. And that was interesting. And when I read about his father and how he felt trying to build a new nation, I was just a teenager trying to fight for freedom, you know, and did silly things and got put in jail. But anyway, that is another story. What is important is Manuel's story. Coming from a long line, as I said, of writers, diplomats, politicians, and not politician in a bad way, politician in the right sense of doing good for the people. And what is important here is, if you look at his grandfather, Manuel is named after his grandfather, Manuel Marquez-Sterling. He was a journalist, a constitutional scholar, ambassador to the USA, I think up to 1934. And that was his grandfather. And then when his father, Carlos, went into politics, his father was a Cuban historian, statesman, helped to draft the Cuba's 1940 Constitution. And then when he came here, he taught at Columbia University. And then I think he moved to Cuba to live in 1978. And then, lo and behold, this grandson and son comes to Plymouth. And what did he do in Plymouth? Well, it was painful. It must be very painful to have a long lineage of great journalists and writers and humane people lost the country, living here and trying to remember and recollect some of the things that happened, that he too should be there to do something. And I remember telling Manuel, when are you going home? Just visit secretly, just maybe to land in Cuba, and then just to smell the mangoes or whatever, you know, to be there again. And I suppose writing this book is exactly that. It may be political, but it has a sense of being back. I think one of the most beautiful things that I received from Manuel is his daughter's composition. Loli, Manuel's daughter, is a great singer. And one of his songs, Only in Miami, if you have listened to that disc, Only in Miami, is a very painful refrain. And the daughter, in many ways, is reflecting what Manuel felt. But enough of that. What is important here is the book. And collapsed in those few years, Manuel is trying to tell us a story that is at the same time painful, but I think it has a vision. It reminds me of Tolstoy's writing. If you recall one of his beautiful lines, he said, you know, when you look into a sewer, what do you really see? Your face and the sky reflected in it. And I think that's what your dad was trying to do. And I think you unconsciously, in writing that, is doing that. A wonderful man, humane, diplomatic. Look at the worst situation there is, but still believing, you know, that you can do something. And the sky is still reflected. And with that, I really would like to introduce Manuel. I've taken a lot of his time, but I think it is important to introduce him that way, because he's too, in many ways, too modest that you don't know that part. So I like to do that, and I present Manuel.